She didn't know what the castle was. That's the first thing you have to understand. If Myra Calloway had known, if she'd had any idea whose doors those were, whose walls those stones belonged to, what slept behind that iron gate, she would have walked into the blizzard and taken her chances with the cold. She would have chosen frostbite. She would have chosen anything. But she didn't know. And that's the only reason any of this happened. I'm going to tell you her story the way it was told to me, in pieces, assembled from what she wrote herself in those first weeks, from what the household staff reported, from what the archivist's office managed to collect before the twin lords sealed the record. Some of it is her words. Some of it is mine. Some of it belongs to people who still won't say their names in connection with any of this. But I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you all of it. And you can decide for yourself whether what happened to Myra Calloway was a tragedy, a miracle, or something in between. Something that doesn't have a name yet, in any language living or dead. The night she arrived. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, recovered from the East Tower study, entry dated Winter Solstice Eve. My boots gave out 3 miles from wherever I am. The left sole started pulling away from the upper sometime around midday, and by dusk the snow was coming in through the gap every time I took a step. It's that specific kind of cold that doesn't feel like cold anymore. It just feels like pressure. Like the world is squeezing you. I'd been walking since the previous morning. I'd left Harwick when the news came that the bridge over the Sierra River had collapsed, both of them, which doesn't make sense, which no one could explain, and the road east was blocked by fallen timber from the windstorm that hit the ridge 2 nights ago. The western route looped back through Dunmore, and I wasn't going to Dunmore. I had my reasons. I still have them. So I went north. I know. You don't go north in winter. Everyone in the valley knows you don't go north past the Redstone marker because the mountains do something strange up there, and the weather comes in fast and the roads disappear. I knew that. But I also knew that I had maybe 4 hours of light left and no shelter, and I'd rather face strange weather than go back to Dunmore. I think about that choice now. I think about it constantly. The version of me standing at that crossroads with the snow starting and the light failing, she had no idea what she was choosing between. She just knew what she was running from. She had no idea what she was running toward. The castle appeared out of the storm the way things appear in dreams, first as a shape you're not sure you're really seeing, a bulk of darkness against darkness, something that your eyes keep sliding off of because your brain isn't sure it's real. Then the wind shifted, and the snow thinned for half a second, and I saw the gate. Iron, black as burned wood, 2 stories high, worked into the shapes of something I couldn't quite make out in the dark, wings, maybe, or hands reaching up. And behind it, a wall. And behind that wall, towers. I stood there for probably 30 seconds just looking at it. There's a thing that happens when you've been walking in cold long enough that your blood has gotten slow, and your thinking has gotten slow with it. The world stops being complicated. You stop thinking about what things are, or what they mean, or whether they're dangerous. You just think about the immediate problem. And my immediate problem was that I was going to freeze to death in this field if I didn't find walls and a roof within the next hour. So I walked to the gate. I found the bell pull. I don't know why there was a bell pull on the outside of a gate that size. You'd think the kind of people who lived somewhere like that wouldn't want to be bothered. But it was there, iron chain hanging down from a bracket, and I grabbed it and pulled. The sound that came back was deeper than I expected. Not a ring, more like a tone, something that vibrated in my chest and in my back teeth. I waited. The snow came back heavy sideways. I pulled the chain again. Then the gate opened. From the household report of Steward Aldrich Penn, submitted to archivist Dorian Hess. The gate opened at the command of the outer ward sensor array, as it always does when a living being with sufficient body warmth and genuine distress registers at the entrance point. This is standard protocol. It has been standard protocol for 300 years. The gate does not open for the dead. It does not open for those without genuine physiological distress markers. It opened for the girl because she was alive, because she was cold, because she was afraid, and because the system recognized her as a threat to no one. I was informed by the gate mechanism's interior alert, a soft chime that I alone carry a receiver for, that someone had entered the outer courtyard. This was the first time in 11 years that the outer gate had opened for a human visitor. I will admit that I was, for a moment, unsure of the protocol. I went to the courtyard door and opened it. She was standing in the middle of the courtyard, snow covering her shoulders and hair, looking up at the keep with an expression I can only describe as someone who has just realized they may have made an error in judgment, but who is too cold to fully process the implications of that error. She was young, early 20s, I estimated. Dark hair, pale from the cold but naturally warm-complected. She was carrying a pack on her back that had seen considerable use, and she was holding one boot in her hand because the sole had finally detached completely. She looked at me. I looked at her. She said, "I'm very sorry to bother you. I just need somewhere to get out of the cold for the night. I can pay. I have," she shifted the pack on her shoulders. "I have things I can trade." I opened the inner door wider. "Please come in," I said. "I'll find you something dry." I am asked, in the formal inquiry that follows this account, whether I should have turned her away. This is a fair question. The formal answer is that Veltharion Keep has never turned away a human visitor who arrived in genuine distress, by standing order of the kings, and that I was therefore acting entirely within protocol. The informal answer is that she had been walking in a blizzard alone with one boot, and she would have been dead before morning if I'd sent her back out. I am over 400 years old, and I have made my peace with most things, but I had not yet made my peace with that. I let her in. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, continued. The man who opened the door was, I'm still not sure how to describe him, tall, formal, in a way that felt like it was natural to him rather than performed, like he'd been wearing formal clothes for so long they'd just become his skin. Old, not in years you could count, but in the way his eyes moved, like they'd seen enough that they'd stopped being surprised by most things. He led me inside, and I stopped thinking about him almost immediately, because the inside of the keep distracted me so completely that I forgot to be anxious about anything else. It was enormous, that was the first thing. Not just the ceiling height, though that was extraordinary, maybe 40 feet in the main hall, but the sense of depth, of rooms behind rooms, corridors branching off corridors, the feeling that the place went back much further than it should have based on the exterior. And it was warm. Not uncomfortably warm, not the blasting heat of a stoked fire, but a consistent, pervasive warmth that seemed to come from the walls themselves, like the stone had its own body temperature. Everything was dark wood and black iron and cold glass. There were lights, not torches, not candles, something else, panels of faint blue-white luminescence set into the walls at intervals, and they were enough to see by but not quite enough to feel comfortable. Everything existed at the edge of visibility. There were no people. That was the other thing I noticed. A place this size, you'd expect staff, movement, noise, but the hallways were empty. The only sound was my footsteps and the wind against the glass. The tall man, I found out later his name was Aldrich, brought me to a room off the main corridor. Not a grand room, just a spare, clean room with a fireplace and a narrow bed, and a chest of drawers that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark wood. He lit the fire by touching a panel on the wall that I didn't understand. Later I understood it, but not that night. He brought me dry clothes, folded, left on the chair. He told me there would be food. "Who lives here?" I asked him before he could leave. He paused at the door. "The house belongs to the Lords Curran and Sorin Veltharion," he said. "They are not currently in residence in the common areas. You are welcome to use this room and the kitchen corridor until the storm passes. Please do not venture into the upper floors." "The lords," I said. "Yes." "Is there a Lady Veltharion?" Something moved across his face, not exactly a smile. "No," he said. "The lords are brothers, twins. They have," he seemed to choose his words, "they have not found anyone they wish to share the house with." I nodded. "Please thank them for me." He left. I sat by the fire and peeled off my wet clothes and put on the dry ones and ate the food when it arrived. Plain food, bread and something like stew, left on a tray outside my door, and I fell asleep within 20 minutes of lying down. I did not hear anything in the night. Or rather, I almost didn't hear anything in the night. Around what must have been the small hours, I woke for a moment, very briefly, not quite conscious, and in that half-awake state I heard something in the corridor outside my door. Not footsteps exactly, more like the suggestion of footsteps, the faintest sound of movement. And then a voice, very quiet, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. And then another voice answering it. Two voices, pitched almost identically, in the same low register. And there was a pause that felt deliberate, like two people stopping to look at something, and then the sound moved away down the corridor and was gone. I fell back asleep. In the morning, I told myself I'd dreamed it. I hadn't dreamed it, but it took me a while to know that for certain. Part 2. What the Castle Held. From the personal correspondence of Lord Sorin Veltharion to his brother Lord Curran Veltharion, recovered from the sealed correspondence archive. Brother, there is a girl in the East Passage room. I saw her when I came down from the library around the 3rd hour. She was asleep, the door was open a crack, and I could see the fire was still burning. She'd left her wet boots in the corridor to dry, and one of them is completely destroyed, the sole hanging by a thread. She smells like the storm, like snow and cold air, and underneath that, something warm. She was walking in this weather alone, which means she was running from something or had nowhere else to go. Aldrich says she offered to pay for the room. She has no idea where she is. I don't know what to do with this. I'm telling you because you're going to find out in the morning anyway, and I'd rather you hear it from me and have time to, I don't know, think, before you go down there with that expression you get. Don't make this complicated, Curran. She needed shelter. She's here. In the morning the storm will likely have eased and she can go wherever she was going. That's all this needs to be. Sorin. From the personal correspondence of Lord Curran Veltharion to his brother Lord Sorin Veltharion, recovered from the sealed correspondence archive. Brother, I already knew. I've been awake. Curran. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated the 1st morning. The storm hadn't eased. I know storms. I grew up near the ridge country. I know how they work. And this one had the feel of something that had decided to stay. The light outside the window was that flat gray-white that means the snow is still coming, and the sky and the ground have become the same color, and there's nothing to do but wait. I found the kitchen corridor Aldrich had mentioned. It wasn't hard. The keep seemed to want to direct you toward certain places and away from others. I'm not sure how else to describe it. There was no explicit signage, but some doors felt more possible than others. The kitchen corridor felt open. The stairs to the upper floors felt like they were made of something thicker than air. The kitchen itself was extraordinary. Whatever I'd expected, an old-fashioned hearth and iron pots, this was not that. There were surfaces I didn't recognize, mechanisms built into the walls that controlled temperature and light, and something I still couldn't identify. And there was food, laid out carefully, the kind of food that requires thought: fresh bread and preserved fruit, and cold meat and tea that was already steeping, as if someone had known I was coming. Which someone had, obviously, I just didn't know that yet. I ate. I sat at the kitchen table and looked out the single window at the snow falling, and tried to think clearly about my situation. I was sheltering in someone's house without permission. Well, with permission, technically, Aldrich had let me in, but I hadn't spoken to the owners themselves. Two brothers, twins, the Lords Veltharion. I didn't know the name. I'd never heard it in Harwick or Dunmore or any of the valley towns. Whoever these people were, they weren't known to me. The keep was too large for two people, too elaborate, too maintained. Everything was clean, everything was functional, everything worked, the lights, the heating, the kitchen mechanisms, but I hadn't seen a single staff member besides Aldrich. That was strange. Places like this needed people to run them. Unless the people running them weren't exactly people. I sat with that thought for a while. Then I put it in the back of my head because I didn't have anywhere useful to go with it, not yet. He came in while I was still sitting there. I heard him before I saw him, or more accurately, I stopped hearing the normal sounds, and that absence was a kind of announcement. The small sounds of the keep, the settling of stone and the whisper of air through vents, all of it went very slightly quieter. And then he was in the doorway. I will try to describe him accurately. It's harder than it sounds. He was tall, 6 feet, maybe a few inches over. Black hair, cut short on the sides, longer on top, pushed back from his face without being styled exactly. He was wearing dark clothing, something between formal and functional, with no decoration I could see. His face was, I keep coming back to the word, constructed. And I know that sounds strange, but that's what it looked like something had been very deliberately made. Symmetrical in the way real faces aren't usually symmetrical. Features that were separately unremarkable, but together added up to something that made you want to keep looking. His eyes were dark, not brown dark. The kind of dark that doesn't reflect light the way normal eyes do, the kind of dark you can't find the back of. He looked at me and I looked at him, and neither of us spoke for a moment. Then he said, "You found the kitchen." His voice was low, even, the kind of voice that doesn't modulate much, that keeps itself at a consistent temperature. "Yes," I said. "I hope that's your steward said the kitchen corridor was available." "It is." He came into the room with a movement that I registered before I fully processed, because it was wrong in the way that the brain notices wrongness before the conscious mind catches up. Not wrong like threatening, wrong like watching something move that moves differently from how you expect living things to move. Smooth without trying to be smooth. Certain of where every part of it was at every moment. He sat down at the opposite end of the table. "Curran Veltharion," he said. "Not I'm Curran Veltharion, not my name is just the name stated offered." "Myra Calloway," I said. Thank you for the room. I didn't mean to impose. The storm was. You had nowhere else to go." It wasn't a question. "No," I said, "not last night." He looked at me with those dark eyes that didn't give anything away. "The storm will continue for at least 2 more days," he said. "The patterns here are predictable once you know them. You're welcome to stay." 2 days, I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something I didn't have a name for yet, not quite unease, not quite curiosity, something between them. "I don't want to be in the way," I said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. "You won't be," he said. "The keep is large." He stood and he was leaving, and something made me say, I don't know why it came out without deliberation, "There were 2 voices last night, in the corridor." He stopped. "You have a brother," I said. "Aldrich mentioned him." Curran Veltharion turned back toward me. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't read at all. "Soren," he said, "yes, you'll meet him." And then he left. I sat there for another few minutes with my cooling tea and thought about dark eyes and the specific quality of a silence that follows someone out of a room. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, continued. Soren came to find me in the afternoon. He was different from Curran in the ways that identical things are different when you look closely. Same height, same build, same dark hair, same constructed symmetry of face, same quality of wrongness in the movement. But where Curran's face was still, Soren's moved more. Not expressively, exactly, more like there was something just behind the surface that kept making small adjustments, like wind over water. He found me in the library. I'd found the library on my own. It wasn't hard to find, just follow the corridor that feels like it wants you to keep going until it opens up. And it opened up into something that made me stop in the doorway for nearly a minute. 5 levels. Open atrium in the center, walkways around each level, shelves from floor to ceiling on every wall. Thousands of books. More than thousands, tens of thousands. In languages I recognized and languages I didn't. Bindings of leather and wood and metal, and one shelf that appeared to be bound in something I couldn't identify that caught the light in a way that made my eyes itch slightly. I'd taken down 3 books I recognized the languages of, and brought them to a reading table near the window when I heard him. "You read Karathi," he said. I looked up. He was standing about 10 feet away, and I hadn't heard him approach, hadn't heard him enter. "A little," I said. "My mother was from the eastern provinces. She taught me the basics." He came closer and looked at the book. Something changed in his face, a quickening almost like light through a shutter. "This is Elowen Moss's travel accounts," he said. "From the Second Blood Age. We have the complete series. Most people who come through here," he stopped. "Most people who come through here can't read Karathi," I said. "Most people who come through here don't come through the library," he said. "They stay in the corridor rooms and leave at first opportunity." I looked at the book in my hands. "Elowen Moss," I said. "Blood Age, what does that mean?" He sat down across from me, which I noted he chose to sit, chose to engage. "It's a calendar system," he said. "Internal to certain families, certain houses." "Your house?" "Yes." I looked at him directly. I'd been deciding for the last 10 minutes, since I'd started looking around the library and counting the books and noticing the things I noticed, whether I was going to ask what I was going to ask. I decided now. "What are you?" I said. He looked back at me without blinking, without, I noticed, breathing. "That's a direct question," he said. "I'm a direct person. I'm also stuck here for 2 days in a house that runs on mechanisms I don't understand, in a library that holds records dating back to what you're calling the Second Blood Age, and the 2 people who live here move like no one I've ever met, and I haven't heard either of you breathe once since we started talking. So." The corner of his mouth moved. It was more than the ghost of a smile, less than a real one. It was something of its own. "You're observant," he said. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said simply, "Vampires." I sat with that. "Okay," I said. He blinked. That time he blinked, which I noted as a thing that seemed like it was a choice rather than a reflex. "Okay." "I mean," I gestured around at the library, at the mechanisms, at the keep as a concept. "I was already most of the way there. I just wanted to hear you say it." He stared at me for a long moment. Then something happened in his face that I had no framework for. It was too complex and too quick, and I couldn't parse it. He looked away toward the window, at the snow still coming down outside. "My brother was right," he said, almost to himself. "About what?" He looked back at me. "He said you were different." I didn't know what to do with that. I opened Elowen Moss's travel accounts and found the page I'd been on. "Can I ask you questions?" I said. "About the books, about what's in them, not about the other things necessarily, just the books." He looked at me for another moment. Then he sat back in his chair, and something about him settled, like a thing putting down a weight it had been carrying. "Yes," he said. "We were in the library until the candle, the not quite candle, the luminescent panel, shifted toward the dimmer setting that marked, I would learn, the arrival of what passed for evening in the keep." Part 3. The Weight of Staying. From the Household Report of Steward Aldrich Penn, continued. By the end of the second day, the situation had clarified itself in a way I had not anticipated and should perhaps have anticipated. The young woman, Miss Calloway, had engaged with the library for the better part of 12 hours across 2 days, with Lord Saurin present for approximately half that time, and Lord Curran making 3 separate visits, each longer than the last. I observed, from the appropriate distance that my position requires, the following. Lord Saurin, who has not engaged at length with any visitor to the keep in my tenure, now 112 years, was reading alongside the visitor by the afternoon of the second day. Not to her, with her. Side by side, occasionally comparing pages, occasionally discussing what they'd found. Lord Curran, who has not engaged with any visitor to the keep without an air of formal management since I have known him, sat down at the kitchen table this morning and had a conversation with Miss Calloway about the bridge collapse she mentioned on her first night. It lasted 2 hours. At the end of it he had, I believe, told her more about the structural engineering of this region's infrastructure, including certain aspects of the road systems that are not supposed to be common knowledge, than he has shared with anyone in a decade. I asked him later how the conversation had gone. He said she asked the right questions. I said, "My lord, she'll be leaving tomorrow if the storm breaks." He said nothing. The storm broke the following morning. I checked the exterior conditions at dawn and they were clear, cold, but clear, passable. Standard winter road conditions for this part of the mountain. I waited for Lord Curran or Lord Saurin to tell me to inform Miss Calloway that the roads were open. By the afternoon, neither of them had said anything. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated the 3rd day. I woke up and the snow had stopped. I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling and knew I should pack my things. I had a direction to go, not a destination exactly, not one I could explain out loud, but a direction, north and east, toward the coast, toward something that had been pulling at me for months before the bridge collapsed and the roads closed and I found myself walking in a blizzard toward a gate I didn't know was wrong. I should pack. I should find Aldrich. I should thank the Lords Veltharion for their hospitality and go. I was still lying there 40 minutes later when someone knocked on my door. It was Saurin. He was holding a book, not offering it, just holding it, the way you hold something when you walked from one place to another while still thinking about it. "The road is clear," he said. "I know," I said. I was about to pack. He looked at the book in his hands. "This is the 4th volume of the Moss accounts," he said. "You'd asked about the 3rd Blood Age Survey chapters last night. They're in here. The context for the bridge." He stopped. I looked at him. He was looking at the book, and his face was doing the thing his face did when he was thinking about several things at the same time, the too quick movement just under the surface. "Saurin," I said. He looked up. "What are you trying to say?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You haven't finished what you were reading." I hadn't. I hadn't finished it and I wanted to. That was the honest answer. I wanted to stay in that library with those books and keep reading and keep asking questions and keep getting the answers I'd been getting, which were extraordinary was the word. Not because the books themselves were extraordinary, though they were, but because of the way they were being explained to me, the context that kept appearing, the things that were being added that weren't in the text itself. "It's not my house," I said. "No," he paused, "but you're welcome in it." I looked at him and thought about dark eyes, both sets of them, and the specific quality of the previous 2 days, which had been unlike any 2 days I could remember. There was something in this place, something I couldn't categorize. Not safety, exactly, safety felt too small, too simple. Something more like the sense of being somewhere that was willing to see you clearly and wasn't afraid of what it saw. "A few more days," I said, "if that's." "As long as you want," he said. He left the book on the chair by the door. I stayed. From the correspondence files of the House Veltharian Administrative Record. Day 5 of Miss Calloway's residence. Lord Curran has reorganized the East Corridor study to provide better light for a reader of human range vision. He did this without instruction and without comment. Day 7. Lord Sauron has begun translating certain sections of the pre-Blood Age text for Miss Calloway, who has sufficient Karathi to read the later documents but not the older dialects. This is, to my knowledge, the first time Lord Sauron has translated materials for a visitor. I don't know what to make of it. Day 9. Miss Calloway asked me today whether there was anywhere in the keep that was off-limits. I gave her the honest answer. The West Tower Archive, which holds documents that require a formal clearance to access, and the Twin Lords' personal quarters on the upper floor. She said, "What about the roof?" I blinked. She said, "It just seems like the view would be, with the mountains and the snow." I told her I would ask. Lord Curran said yes before I finished the question. Day 12. She has been on the roof every evening since then. She brings her journal and writes for an hour, watching the mountains go gold and then gray and then dark. The first evening she went up alone. Since the second evening, one or both of the lords has gone up with her. They don't talk up there, or they don't talk much. I can hear them sometimes when I'm on the upper corridor, just the occasional sentence, long silences, the sound of the wind. I find I am becoming uncertain about the natural end point of this arrangement. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated approximately day 14. I have been here 2 weeks and I need to write down what I know and what I think I know because it's starting to blur together, and I've always been better at thinking when I'm writing. What I know. Curran and Sauron Veltharian are vampires. They are old. I don't know exactly how old, they're vague about this, but the way they reference historical events as things they either witnessed or heard about from people who did suggests we're talking about centuries. Plural. They've lived in this keep for at least 400 years. Before that they were somewhere else, they haven't said where. They are not dangerous to me. I want to be clear with myself about this because I keep waiting for the moment where it changes and it hasn't changed. I'm not naive. I know what vampires are supposed to be, what the stories say. But I have been here for 2 weeks and I am unharmed and I think I genuinely believe that I am not being kept here for sinister purposes. That if I said tomorrow I need to leave, they would let me leave. I haven't said that tomorrow. What I think I know. Something is happening. I can't put it more precisely than that because I don't have the right vocabulary for it yet. It's in the way Curran sits across from me in the kitchen for 2 hours and talks about things he clearly hasn't talked about in a very long time. It's in the way Sauron hands me books with specific pages already marked, things he thought I'd want to read, things that are right because he's been paying attention in a way that sees me clearly. It's in the evenings on the roof, when the 3 of us sit with the wind coming off the mountains and don't need to fill the silence with anything. It's in the fact that I don't want to leave. I came north by accident. I came to this gate because it was the only gate and I was cold and I was scared and I had nowhere else to go. None of this was chosen. None of it was planned. But I am sitting on the roof of a vampire castle watching the mountains, and I am not afraid, and something in me that has been tight for a very long time. Something that has been tight since before Dunmore, since before the road closed, since before all of this has started to loosen. That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all. Part 4. The Keeping. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated day 17. I found the West Tower Archive. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the continuation of the Moss series. Sauron had mentioned the 7th volume had been moved for rebinding and was back on the shelf now. And I took a wrong turn somewhere between the 3rd level walkway and the east reading alcove and found myself in a corridor I didn't recognize. The door at the end was different from the other doors. Not locked in any way I could see. Just closed with a different quality to its closedness than the other doors had. I stood in front of it for a minute. Then I went back the way I'd come and found the 7th volume of the Moss accounts where Soren had said it would be. I told Curran about it that evening on the roof. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What did you do?" "I left," I said. He looked at me in that way he has, the one where he's reading something that isn't on the surface. "Why?" "Because Aldrich told me it was off limits, and I believe in respecting the rules of a house that isn't mine." Curran was quiet for another moment. "What's in there?" I said. "Records," he said. "From before." "Before the Blood Age calendars." "Before the Blood Age calendars." I looked at the mountains. A hawk was doing something at the tree line, too far away to see clearly. "How old are those records?" "Old," he said. He paused. "Older than the current forms of most things." I thought about that. When you say you're old, how old? He looked at me sideways. It was the kind of sideways that had a slight edge of humor to it, the first time I'd seen that. "Very," he said. "Centuries?" "Yes." "More than one?" "More than a few." I absorbed this. "And before the keep," I said. He was quiet for long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "There was another place, a long time ago. We built this one because the other one," he stopped. "Because it was time for something new." I wanted to ask more. I didn't. I had learned in 17 days that there was a particular quality to his silences, the ones that closed off a subject versus the ones that were just thinking, and this one had the closing quality. "The records in the archive," I said. "From before, would you ever show me any of them?" He looked at me. "Not if it's I know Aldrich said off limits. I'm not trying to." "I'll think about it," he said. That wasn't no. From the personal correspondence of Lord Curran Veltharion to his brother, Lord Soren Veltharion. "Brother?" She asked about the archive. I told her I'd think about it. I don't know why I said that instead of no. I was going to say no. I had the word ready. "I want you to know that I'm aware of what's happening. I want to be clear that I'm not unaware of it. I see it as clearly as I see everything." She asked the right question. About the archive. She asked it the right way, not demanding, not presumptuous, genuinely curious, genuinely careful about the line she'd been told was there. That's the thing about her, Soren. She's careful. She pays attention. She follows the rules of a house she says isn't hers and then asks carefully about the exceptions. What I'm saying is, I think she could read the archive records. What I'm saying is, I don't think she should leave. I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. I've been sitting with it for 3 days before writing this, and it doesn't sound different on the 4th day. What I'm saying is, I don't think she should leave, and I think I need to hear from you that this is not a bad thing, or I need to hear from you that it is, and then we need to have a real conversation about it. Curran. From the personal correspondence of Lord Soren Veltharion to his brother, Lord Curran Veltharion. Brother. It's not a bad thing. Soren. 2 minutes later, a second note. It's terrifying, actually, but that's different from bad. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated day 20. Soren came to me this morning with a look on his face that I had started to be able to read. Not fully, not with certainty, because the emotional vocabulary of his face was not the same as a human face, and I was still learning it. But I'd gotten far enough to know the difference between the expression that meant he was thinking about something book-related, and the expression that meant something else. "Curran wants to show you something," he said. He took me to the West Tower. The door was open. The archive room was smaller than I'd expected. Not the vast cathedral space of the library. Just a room, a good-sized room, with shelves along all four walls and a long table in the center, and a light source I couldn't identify in the ceiling that produced something not quite like daylight, and not quite like lamplight but somewhere in between. Curran was standing at the far end. He'd pulled a document from one of the shelves, carefully, both hands, the way you handle something you're not sure will survive the handling. "These are the oldest records we have," he said. "They predate the first Blood Age calendar by considerably. We don't know exactly. The dating methodology used then doesn't translate cleanly to any system still in use." He laid the document on the table. I came closer, I looked at it. It was on material that wasn't paper, thicker, denser, a faint yellowish cast. The writing was in a script I didn't recognize at all, characters I'd never seen in any of the books in the library. But underneath the writing, worked in fine lines, were diagrams. Schematics almost. Architectural plans maybe. Or something like architectural plans for structures that didn't follow the geometries of any building I'd ever seen. "What language is this?" I said. "There isn't a name for it anymore," Curran said. "There's no one alive who speaks it natively. There are maybe 4 people in the current world who can read it, and 2 of them are in this room." I looked up at him. "One of the things I was doing in the centuries before this keep," he said, "was collecting these, from the places where they'd been left. There was a period in the very early history of what the Blood Age calendars call the First Age, when the people who made these were still extant in some form. And then they weren't. And what was left were records, and I spent a long time making sure the records didn't disappear with them." "Who were they?" I said. "We call them the priors," Soren said from behind me. I hadn't heard him come in. "It's not their name, it's just a placeholder the archive system uses. Their actual name for themselves is in the documents. Curran can read it." I looked at Curran. "The closest translation," he said, "is something like the ones who were here before the forgetting." I looked back at the document, the diagrams, the structures that didn't follow normal geometry. "What happened to them?" I said. "We don't know entirely," Curran said. "The records describe a transition, something changing in the world at a fundamental level. The things that could exist in the world before the change couldn't survive it, or couldn't survive it in the same form." "Did they," I stopped, chose my words, "did they leave anything behind, besides the records?" Curran looked at me steadily. "Yes," he said. "What?" "That," he said, "is a longer conversation." I looked at the document for another few seconds, then I looked up at him. "I want to have it," I said, "the longer conversation." He held my gaze. "I know," he said. Part 5, The Question of Leaving. From the Household Report of Steward Aldrich Penn, continued. Day 23. I had expected, by this point, for one of 3 things to have happened. First, Miss Calloway would have grown uncomfortable, either frightened of what the Lords are, or unnerved by the isolation, or simply drawn back toward human civilization, and would have asked to leave. Second, the Lords would have grown bored or cautious, both of which have happened in past situations with visitors, though none lasting more than a week, and would have ended the arrangement. Third, something would have happened that I hadn't anticipated. The third thing is happening. I am not sure I have adequate language for it. I am 460 years old, and in that time I have served 3 noble houses and seen a great many things, and I am having difficulty categorizing what is occurring in this keep. Miss Calloway is not afraid. She was briefly uncertain in the first days, and she is careful, consistently and genuinely careful, in the ways that a thoughtful person is careful around things they don't fully understand. But she is not afraid. And in my experience, humans who know what the Lords are and stay in close proximity to them for more than a week or 2 are either performing a lack of fear because they have something to gain, or they have genuinely made their peace with the situation. Miss Calloway has made her peace with the situation. More than that, This is what I find difficult to articulate. She has moved into the space here the way water moves into a container. Not forcing, not pushing, just filling the shape of the available room, quietly, completely, until you can't quite remember what the room looked like empty. Lord Curran has not suggested she leave. Lord Soren has not suggested she leave. Neither of them has asked me to prepare anything that would facilitate her departure. This morning I was in the corridor near the library and I heard them all three inside. Not words mostly, just the murmur of voices, the sound of pages, and occasionally laughter. Lord Soren laughed. I have not heard that in. I genuinely cannot remember the last time I heard Lord Soren laugh. I don't know what my responsibility is here. I am the steward of this house and my loyalty is to its lords. My lords are not harming this young woman. They are not manipulating her, not compelling her, not using any of the abilities at their disposal to influence her stay. I have been watching carefully. What I can say is that I believe, at this point, that neither of them wants her to leave. And I am becoming uncertain whether either of them will say so clearly if she decides she should. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated day 25. My sister is in Vale. She doesn't know where I am. She knows I left Harwick after the bridges, and she knows I was heading east, but I didn't know I would turn north, so there was nothing to tell her. And I have no way to send word from here. The keep doesn't have any communication mechanism I know how to use, and the nearest town that would have a messenger service is at least 2 days' walk from the gate. I keep meaning to ask about this. Curran handles correspondence. I've seen him at the desk in the Eastern study, and I've meant to ask if there's a way to get a message out. I should ask. I should let my sister know I'm alive and not frozen in a ditch somewhere. I keep not asking. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I asked Soren today whether they ever had visitors. He thought about it. Rarely, he said, and rarely willingly. What does that mean? It means that most of the people who have come here came because they wanted something specific from us. Something we have, or something they think we have. They come with purpose, and they leave when the purpose is fulfilled or fails. What did they want? Knowledge, usually, he said. The archive, the library. Occasionally, he paused. Occasionally they came to make deals. Vampires are assumed in certain human traditions to be willing to trade extended life for things of value. This is not entirely inaccurate. We have, over the centuries, made arrangements of that kind. Did you make those arrangements willingly? He looked at me with something I was starting to recognize as appreciation, the specific appreciation for a question that cuts directly to the thing. No, he said. Not always. Some of them were coerced. Some of them we were younger and less wise about the difference between what someone wants and what someone needs. And now we don't make those arrangements, he said. We've declined every offer for the last 100 years. I thought about this. But I'm here, I said. And I'm not here for an arrangement. I didn't come for knowledge or deals. I came because I had nowhere else to go. Yes, he said. Does that make a difference? That I came without wanting something specific? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you know what an unexpected thing is? He said. I think so. When you've lived as long as we have, he said, the world becomes very legible, very predictable. Not in the day-to-day specifics, storms still surprise you, accidents still happen, but in terms of what things are, what they mean, what follows from what. You develop a model of the world that is very accurate and very comprehensive, and things fit into it. Everything fits. He paused. And then something arrives that doesn't fit, he said. That genuinely doesn't fit. That isn't what you expected and isn't a variant of what you expected and requires you to reopen the model, adjust it, make room. He looked at me. Yes, he said, it makes a difference. From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated day 28. Curran asked me last night what I was running from. We were in the archive. He'd been teaching me the prior script, not enough to read it, just enough to recognize the patterns, to understand how the symbols work together. It was something I'd asked about 3 days ago, and he'd started doing it the next day, and I hadn't thought about what it meant that he'd started doing it, not until last night. We'd been working for a few hours when he asked, quiet, direct, no preamble. "What were you running from?" he said. I put down the tracing paper I'd been using to practice the script. "Dunmore," I said. "That's a town." "Yes." "What was in Dunmore?" I thought about how to answer this. I'm not a person who tells things quickly, not personal things, not the things that actually matter. I have a habit of keeping the important parts in the back until I know whether the person I'm talking to is worth the front. Curran Veltharian, in 4 weeks, had demonstrated quite clearly that he was worth the front. "My husband," I said. He was very still. He's always still, but this was a different quality of stillness. "Was," he said. "We're separated. I left 8 months ago. I stopped. Found the cleaner version of the sentence, the one that said the thing without getting lost in the details. He believed I belonged to him. I stopped agreeing with that. He didn't adapt well to me stopping." "Did he hurt you?" "Not in ways that left marks he couldn't explain." Curran's eyes were dark in the archive light, and I couldn't read them, but I could feel the quality of his attention, which was complete and still, and not going anywhere. "Are you afraid of him?" he said. "Yes," I said. "Less than I used to be, but yes." "He won't come here," Curran said. I looked at him. "Men like that," he said, "don't follow into places they can't control. They follow where they believe they have standing. They follow where the systems support them, the town systems, the social systems, the legal systems. None of those systems exist here. He won't come." I absorbed this. "How do you know what men like that do?" I said. He looked at me steadily. "I've lived a long time," he said. "I've seen every kind of person that exists, multiple times." I nodded. Then, because it was in my head and we were already here in the deep water, I said, "Is that why you haven't told me to leave? Because you know what I'm running from?" The stillness again. He reached forward and turned the tracing paper over, straightening it on the table, an adjustment that wasn't necessary. "That's part of it," he said. "What's the other part?" He looked up at me. His dark eyes, no bottom to them, reading everything and giving back only what he chose to give. "I don't want you to," he said. Part 6. What stays? From Myra Calloway's personal journal, entry dated day 31. A month. I've been here a month. I sent my sister a letter through Curran's correspondence channel. He has a system, a network of people who carry messages, people who know him in the towns and owe him the kind of favor that gets paid in reliable discretion. The letter went out 5 days ago and the reply came back today. My sister is furious and relieved in roughly equal measure. She demands to know where I am. She demands to know that I'm safe. She says she's been out of her mind since the bridges. I wrote back that I'm safe, that I found shelter, that the people sheltering me are good. I didn't say more than that. I need to think about how to say more than that. Soren found me on the roof this evening, and we sat in the cold. Cold doesn't bother me the way it used to. There's a warmth in the keep that seems to follow you out for a little while, and watched the last of the sun hit the eastern peaks and turn them that impossible red-orange that the altitude makes happen. Curran told me what he said, Soren said, in the archive. I looked at him. He told you he doesn't want you to leave, he said. I want you to know that it's not only him. It's not a one-sided thing. Soren, I said. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve to know, he said. Not because I expect it to change your plans, whatever they are. Not as pressure, just as honesty. I looked at the mountains. I don't know what my plans are, I said. That's allowed. It doesn't bother you. That I've been here a month and I still don't know if I'm staying or going. He was quiet. Then, we've been here 400 years, he said. We can wait. I sat with that. What would it look like, I said eventually, if I stayed? What would that actually look like? He thought about it carefully. I appreciated that he thought about it instead of answering immediately, because the immediate answer is always the easy one. I think, he said, it would look like this. What we're already doing, the library, the archive, the evenings up here, meals in the kitchen, conversations that go places we didn't expect them to go. He paused. The keep has more rooms than we've ever used. There are parts of it that have been closed for decades, rooms that were built for purposes we've never had. What purposes? For people, he said simply. The house was built to hold people, not just us. There are rooms in the plans. Curran designed the plans in the original build that were meant for community, you might say, for people who might stay, who might become part of this place. Did anyone ever stay? Not for a very long time, he said, not in a way that counted. I looked at him. His face was doing the thing, the movement under the surface, the wind over water. Does it scare you? I said. That someone might now. He held my gaze. Yes, he said. But less than the other thing. What other thing? That you might not. From the personal correspondence of Lord Curran Veltharion to Steward Aldrich Penn. Aldrich, please open the south wing. The east-facing suite on the second level. The rooms that connect to the secondary reading room. Have them cleaned and the mechanisms calibrated. If you have questions, I will answer them. Okay.